Welcome to the second of the 4 sessions which make up the Hong Kong Visa Application Roadmap series, the step-by-step guide to making any kind of Hong Kong visa application, and used in conjunction with the extensive free resources contained in the Hong Kong Visa Handbook. My name is Stephen Barnes, co-founder of the Hong Kong Visa Centre. For our session today, we will go through how to go about preparing for your Hong Kong visa application, looking particularly at the essential issue of case approvability in your circumstances, identifying the argument, if any, which needs to be made, recognising strengths and weaknesses which exist in your application, and understanding and addressing any causes for concern. As always, it's good to start off with a case study from our files, which help to set the scene for the use of the roadmap in your own application. Our client was a French national with a wife and 5-year-old daughter. All of them were French citizens. He'd first arrived in Hong Kong in 2004 as a student to undertake an MBA program at the University of Hong Kong. Upon graduation in 2006, he joined a European investment bank where he worked continuously until 2010, when unfortunately he was made redundant as part of the banking challenges associated with the global financial crisis. At the time he instructed us, he had had an employment visa sponsored by his ex-employing investment bank with a 2-year period of stay endorsed inside his passport, taking him up to just short of the complete 7-year time frame for the purposes of an application for the right of abode. In 2010, with the chances of him gaining further employment in the investment banking game unlikely in the near term, our client decided to start a French wine importing business, but didn't apply for an adjustment in his immigration status to allow him to do this. He really needed an investment visa, but had never bothered to get one. As the period of stay unveiled by the investment bank expired 6 weeks before he would have been continuous resident for the 7 years needed for the right of abode application, he decided that he would take his family out of Hong Kong at the time his employment visa expired and bring them all back in as visitors, gaining a 90-day period of stay when they entered, waited 6 weeks, then submitted an application for the right of abode. This was in 2011, 2 weeks before he asked us for our help. At the time of his right of abode application, he didn't realise that you can't apply for permanent residency if you have a visitor visa. You need to be resident at the time you apply. Instead, he and his family were visiting. The Hong Kong Immigration Department knocked back his application for permanent residency on this ground, and so he found his way to us. The key issues in this application were the fact of his visitor visa status at the time he applied for the right of abode, the 11 months he'd been working his French wine import business unapproved by the Hong Kong immigration authorities. As a prior student from Hong Kong U, he could take advantage as a returning graduate and be afforded positive consideration for any application that he might make in order to take up a new job in Hong Kong, of course for which he'd need an offer of employment from a suitably qualified sponsor. Coincidentally, just after our client approached us for advice, an ex-colleague of his from the investment bank where he'd worked previously asked him to come and consult on an energy project in the Philippines. This ex-colleague had, 3 years prior, provided consulting services through his own newly established one-man company and had turned over 10 million Hong Kong dollars in consulting fees in the first 18 months. However, the project had come to a temporary halt, as these things often do, as certain government approvals processes played themselves out. The project had been in a temporary hiatus but had, just recently, been reactivated in light of the Philippines government providing whatever consents had been necessary for it to progress to the next phase. Consequently, and somewhat out of the blue, our client received an offer of employment from his ex-colleague for him to assist him in the next phase of the energy project. This was good news on the one hand, but on the other, the employing business was still very much a brass plaque consulting concern, which had effectively been dormant for the last 18 months. On the plus side, it had a strong balance sheet and also had a receipt from the Hong Kong Inland Revenue for more than $1 million it had paid in profits tax the year before. It also had a formal notification from its sole client that the energy project was now recommencing and thus was manifestly ready to re-engage in providing services once more. We advised our client that this could be a heaven-sent opportunity for us to secure an employment visa for him, with dependent visas for his wife and daughter, relying on the relaxed application consideration criteria which the Hong Kong ID afford to non-local graduates of Hong Kong universities. We did, on the other hand, counsel that as the sponsoring employer was pretty much still a shell of an operation, there would be some tussling with the immigration department to persuade them of its bona fides as a quality employment visa sponsor. As expected, we locked horns with the department about the quality of the sponsor and had several exchanges with them, each time providing them with more information, proof of the good prospects for the business, and the critical role our client was going to be playing in its operations. Finally, we suggested to the Hong Kong ID that they approve our client's employment visa subject to business review at the end of 12 months. A not unusual proposition, but suitable in the circumstances. The Hong Kong Immigration Department agreed, and our client and his family's applications were duly approved subject to this condition. As the strategy all along had been to provide our client with a residence visa for the purposes of his right of abode application, the fact of this business review was ultimately unimportant, because it would only come into play if our client applied for an extension to his new employment visa 12 months down the road. In fact, 2 months after this, the right of abode applications were approved, and so business review was never an issue. The really good news is that this client is now providing consulting services to the energy project and running his French wine importing business quite lawfully as a permanent resident. This case example serves to illustrate the kinds of twists and turns that can occur in any Hong Kong immigration application, setting out issues in relation to the application of the test for approval, lines of argument to be adopted, strengths and weaknesses in the given case situation, opportunities which presented themselves in this application, and concerns in relation to sponsorship which were ultimately overcome with a suggestion that worked for all parties concerned. And these are the very issues that we're going to look at right now. As always, as we work our way through the various sections on the roadmap, I'll often refer you to the specific resources contained in the Hong Kong Visa Handbook, which discuss in considerable detail the factors which you need to take into consideration in relation to the visa type that you're applying for. Each section will refer to different resources, so the handbook and the roadmap work together hand in hand. So, let's get started on case preparation. On page 2 of the roadmap, you'll find the section tabbed in green called Prepare. This contains 6 sections for consideration, and we're going to discuss each separately now. The key thing to consider is that this section of the roadmap is designed to pave the way to your writing your supporting application cover letter. In relation to the approvability test challenges, the first thing that you need to do is to watch the Preparing Your Case presentation of the Hong Kong Visa Handbook, and also read the Visa Information document. These 2 resources lay out in detail the essential tests which the Hong Kong ID apply to any given visa situation to ascertain if the application is approvable or not. Consequently, you need to check the approvability test applicable to your case circumstances and ensure that you can address each element of it in the process getting over the first hurdle in any Hong Kong visa application, the second being the ability to support your assertions and representations with suitable and sufficient documentation. At this point in the exercise, it's worth mentioning some typical scenarios where applications tend to be stillborn from the get-go. These are where an applicant simply doesn't have the necessary skills, qualifications or experience needed for a job, or where an annual employment is valued at less than 200,000 Hong Kong dollars, where the only beneficiary in a business investment visa application will be the applicant himself and not Hong Kong more widely, where there isn't the correct legal relationships to qualify for dependent visas. In the case of the QMAS program, a failure to appreciate just how competitive it is and just how top drawer the successful applicants tend to be. For de factos and same-sex partner applicants, insufficient prior cohabitation outside of Hong Kong. There's also the 1-year overseas residence rule for Chinese nationals who are not applying via the QMAS and Mainland Talents program, or attempting to use a training visa as a poor proxy for an employment visa. And in the case of the travel pass, expecting an easy waiver of the 3 trips rule in order to be in the running for consideration. Therefore, it's vital to understand the approvability challenges and make sure that you will at least be able to get out of the starting gate. Shortcomings in the approvability test are not always fatal, but will require a bold, well-documented and substantial argument, so refer to the Hong Kong Visa Handbook and know exactly what you're up against. Lines of argument. In this section, you begin to think about the approvability test as it applies in your circumstances, and begin to mark the elements of the cut and thrust of your application for elaboration and inclusion in your supporting covering letter. For example, a same-sex partner application might include the following: the dates you first met, documented holidays taken together, proof of prior cohabitation, any legal arrangements in hand which testify to the life partner nature of your relationship, ability for the sponsoring partner to financially support the other, is there any independent capability of the sponsored partner to contribute to the cost of living in Hong Kong without needing to work or join in a business. Another example, this time in the case of a business investment visa application, the lines of argument, for example, could read: significant prior track record in a similar business previously, requisite capital on hand to fund the business plan for the first 6 months of operation, it's a business which manifestly is going to create local jobs sooner rather than later, it has significant commercial support from a well-established business in Hong Kong. Of course, these two examples shouldn't be taken as a statement of what is definitively required in these two specific types of visa applications. No, you need to refer to the Hong Kong Visa Handbook for that. Rather, the intention is to provide a notion of the types of items which will be listed in your roadmap document after you've gone through the process of considering how you will be able to address the challenges posed by the approvability test as applied to the specifics of your own case circumstances. Case strengths generally. The common sense approach to any kind of Hong Kong visa application is to note all that which strikes a truly positive chord against the approvability test, whilst downplaying the negative. Consider, for example, such things as the following: a positive history of prior residence in Hong Kong, sufficient funding on hand where relevant for the purposes of the application. For employment and business investment visas, the quality of the employer and the identity of the sponsor. For employment visa and QMAS applications, the strength of your CV, your history of success, and the nature of your prior employments. Where there is an investment visa application, your track record in business previously, plans to employ Hong Kong locals, or the advanced nature of your technology, service, product, or novel way of carrying on your business. Also, clean relationships in respect of traditional legal dependent visa applications, and any number of other aspects which serve to reflect the strength of your case. You see, there's no definitive list of inclusions that you would want to write into this section of the roadmap, but at the end of the exercise you should have 4 to 5 good "this is why my application should be approved" imperatives to be written up into your supporting cover letter. Case weaknesses. In this section of the roadmap, you need to list all the problems with the application as you see them. If they're fundamental to satisfying the approvability test, you need to be ready to address each one of them individually and offer explanations and alternate criteria as to why the Hong Kong ID should not diminish the strength of your application in their wake. If the weaknesses are essentially fatal to your cause, you will no doubt need to consider alternate visa types, or indeed not proceeding after all. If the weaknesses are in fact not fundamental, but mostly an annoying distraction from the essentially sound nature of your case, then you address the issue they impact upon squarely in a paragraph each within your supporting cover letter, emphasizing the positive opposite and downplaying the obvious negation or shortcoming which the weakness represents. Opportunities in any given prospect visa application sometimes present themselves in unexpected and helpful ways. For example, you might choose the timing of the commencement of your application to coincide with the occurrence of a positive event, especially in the context of a business investment visa application, and this would give your application a significant leg up. Opportunistically, you might be the beneficiary of favourable treatment by the Hong Kong ID, as were investment bankers based in Japan in the wake of the Fukushima nuclear crisis in recent years. Married couples who intend to start their own business only need one investment visa. The other partner can undertake the business quite lawfully once his or her dependent visa has been approved. In the case of an employment visa holding spouse losing their job, the married couple could seek to swap statuses where the dependent visa holding spouse with her own business converts to an investment visa on the strength of her incumbent business. Also, as was the case with the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme when it was first introduced, certain applicant holding properties worth 6.5 million Hong Kong dollars were able to immediately qualify for an adjustment in their immigration status from sponsored employment to independent capital investment just by virtue of the value of the roof over their head, although this is no longer applicable. If you've lived in Hong Kong for 7 years but can't declare that you've taken Hong Kong as your only place of residence, you could seek unconditional stay instead. How about joining in a side business first before you make a full investment visa application subsequently? If you're a business-owning dependent visa holder and your relationship with your spouse is broken down, you can take advantage of the relaxed consideration processes to allow you to remain in Hong Kong on the strength of your current business. In the concerns section of the document, you note down all of those specific issues which have come to light during the development of the roadmap thus far, which are now apparent to you as being important factors to be taken into consideration during the pendency of your application. Issues you might be noting down here could be, for example, that your funds are dwindling rapidly before you're able to get your investment visa application into the department for consideration. Relationships could be breaking down, impacting on dependent visa availability. It's become apparent that you have a prior history of poor relationships with the Hong Kong ID. Possibly you're out of residence visa status at the time your eligibility to make an application for the right of abode comes up. It might be that your proposed new employer is a startup business only modestly capitalized, and there are concerns as to their quality as a sponsor for your employment visa. Maybe you have no clear idea of the entire file which the Hong Kong ID are holding on you, as your previous employer or immigration consultant refuses to release it to you. Possibly you're claiming qualifications or experience that you are unable to support with confirmatory documentation. So, with all of this information written down in one place, you will now have the skeleton contents of your cover letter. You then go to the relevant section of the Hong Kong Visa Handbook and download our templates to guide you in crafting your supporting cover letter, suitably adapting them to fit the contingencies of your own case circumstances. And finally, you start thinking about the documentation that you're going to need, but that's covered in our next session tomorrow. So that concludes part 2 of the 4-part series on the Hong Kong Visa Application Roadmap. Please remember, if you have any questions relating to your application, simply go to our blog, write them up on a no-name basis, and we'll endeavour to give you a podcast answer via our blog within 48 hours, all part of the service and completely free of charge to members of our mailing list. You will receive the third of our emails with part 3 of the Visa Application Roadmap series tomorrow. You should by now be getting to the point where you really have a clear understanding of what you should be doing with and the best way to go about preparing for your Hong Kong visa application. So next time we'll be looking at issues associated with supporting documentation, completing the application forms and compiling your entire submission bundle together, making it all ready for the all-important day of application. And, as always, we'll be working in tandem with the substantial free resources contained in the Hong Kong Visa Handbook. So, bye for now, and I look forward to resuming our time together again tomorrow.